So I had read in the newspaper of a world famous French mime named Marcel Marceau, and he was coming to San Francisco for his first tour in America. So naturally, I read about that. So as soon as I finished teaching for the day, I hurried to get to San Francisco. And it was a really rainy day. So I parked a few blocks away from where the show was happening. And I went in to the theater and I sat up on the balcony. And I mean, it was crowded. It was so many people were there. So then when the curtains rose, there was Marcel Marceau standing on the stage. And that was it. I fell in love. So I watched the whole show in awe. And then after it finished, people started leaving. But I stayed in my seat up there at the balcony until I was the only person left in this big theater house. And I sat there thinking, if this man, Marcel Marceau, if he can perform for 2 hours and not say a single word, then why can't I? So when I eventually ended up leaving the theater house, I realized that it was still raining outside. And my car was parked about 3 or 4 blocks away, so I couldn't really run without ending up soaking wet. So I looked over into the rain and then I looked over to my side and noticed an overhang that was connected to an alley that led to backstage. And I kind of thought to myself, why don't I try to go backstage and see maybe I can meet Marceau? I mean, I had two options here, two roads to take. I could go out into the rain or I could try the alley. And, of course, I decided to go backstage. So I walked up to the door and it was open, and I was surprised because when I walked in, right there was Marceau. And he was pacing the stage resting before he had another performance later that night. And he caught me staring at him and he started speaking to me, and I gestured to him that I was deaf, and I said we could communicate by writing back and forth. So he motioned for me to come up to him, and that's how I met him. And I told him that I wished I could study miming deeply and fully with him. I asked him where I could do that. And he asked me, "Are you really interested?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And he said, "Okay, do you want to perform for me?" And I said, "Me? Okay." So I took off my jacket, I loosened my tie, and I went ahead and started miming for him. And I had already practiced some before, so I knew what I was doing. But he sat and watched me the whole time as I mimed. And after I was done, he wrote me a note, and I still had that paper. I kept it, but I eventually ended up giving it to the archive over at Gallaudet. But the paper said, "I like what I saw. I would like to invite you to Paris in the summertime." And I accepted his invitation. And he told me it was at no charge, and I was just shocked. It was really a big honor for me. So I was the only deaf person who was working as a professional actor, but before long, other people started appearing out of nowhere, one by one. And it really opened the doors. So I was teaching a class for mime and just other things related to acting. And when the class was over, all of the students started to leave. And I noticed that Marley Matlin, she was just still sitting there patiently. And I asked her, "You don't want to leave? You want to stay? What are you doing?" And she looked at me and said, "I have a question." And I said, "Okay, what's your question?" And she looked a little nervous and she said, "Can I become an actress?" And I said, "Why not? You just have to do it." And sure enough, a few years later, there she was on the stage holding her Oscar. And I was shocked. So really, most of the credit goes to Marley. She opened a lot of doors for deaf to be able to become actors. So life has many different roads. You choose the right road and you continue down it. Take the road less traveled by. Pick the one that is less traveled. That's what I did. I came out of the theater that day. When I was finished watching Marcel's show, and I stood out there and I was looking out at the rain, and I had the alley to my side. And which did I choose? Did I go out to the rain and just get in my car and drive home? No, I didn't. I went to the backstage door. And it made all the difference in the world.